Russian President Vladimir Putin boasted about Russia's nuclear might at his annual State of the Nation address in Moscow on Thursday and seemed to confirm the existence of a long-feared Russian doomsday device.
President Vladimir Putin claims his country has nuclear weapons that can avoid defense systems. And he warned that Moscow won't be afraid to use those weapons if any of its allies come under nuclear attack.
Russia this morning is flexing its military muscle, unveiling a new line of nuclear weapons that it claims can reach almost anywhere in the world and would render American defense systems useless. Saying nobody listened to us, so listen to us now.
Russian President Vladimir Putin announcing his country has developed a new nuclear-capable weapon that includes an intercontinental ballistic missile that he says renders defense systems, quote, useless. Putin making those comments during his annual State of the Nation address, the Russian president telling lawmakers that the ICBM has a longer range than any other and can reach almost any target around the world. So scary stuff.
As evidence of Russia's interference in America's elections continues to mount, the Russian president this morning used his annual State of the Union address to warn Washington against militarily messing with Russia, revealing a range of new weapons, threatening to turn tensions with Washington into a new Cold War that could get hot. Russia this morning is flexing its military muscle, unveiling a new line of nuclear weapons that it claims can reach almost anywhere in the world and would render American defense systems useless. Saying nobody listened to us, so listen to us now. In his marathon State of the Union speech ahead of this month's presidential election, President Vladimir Putin's message to Washington was loud and clear. And I am not bluffing. The new weapons include a nuclear-powered underwater drone and a nuclear-powered cruise missile, difficult to detect and Russia claims impossible to intercept. But Putin says that Russia is not the aggressor, blaming the new arms race on America's decision to pull out of the 1972 anti-ballistic missile treaty and for building new bases close to Russia's borders. Now, Putin also said that Moscow would regard a nuclear attack on its allies as an attack on Russia itself and would immediately respond. And Savannah, this comes as President Donald Trump set the date for his military campaign for next Veterans Day, that is November 11th. Both sides seemingly set on flexing their military muscle as tensions continue to mount. Savannah?
All right, Lucy, thank you so much. Let's turn to Jeremy Bash, NBC's national security analyst. And Jeremy, before we get to the technical side of these new weapons Vladimir Putin's talking about, what's going on here? Because it doesn't feel like we've heard this kind of language, this hot rhetoric from Russia in a very long time. What's Putin's angle here?
Yeah, Savannah, but nobody should be surprised because Russia has been building these major weapon systems for a long time. They want to build up their nuclear arsenal. They effectively have pulled out of international arms agreements, but more fundamentally, they see a message from Washington, from Donald Trump, where we recently said we're going to build new nuclear weapons, And hey, it's back to the bad old days between Washington and Moscow trying to one-up each other with these nuclear weapons.
And then let's talk about the weapons themselves, because he seems to be quite proud of them. I read that he wants to have a naming contest throughout Russia to name these weapons. Are they as terrifying and ominous as Putin makes them out to be?
Well, for many years, the Defense Department has been concerned about Russia's development. I mean, effectively, if you have a cruise missile that can fly low and fast, it cannot be hit by our missile defense systems, and our coastal cities, Boston, New York, Washington, are definitely at risk.
Jeremy Bash, thank you so much with the disturbing story this morning.
Russian President Vladimir Putin claims his country has nuclear weapons that can avoid defense systems. And he warned that Moscow won't be afraid to use those weapons if any of its allies come under nuclear attack. Putin described the new weaponry during his annual speech to lawmakers in Moscow on Thursday. During the nearly 2-hour speech, he showed video clips of the arsenal, which includes underwater drones, intercontinental missiles, and a hypersonic system that heads for its target like a meteorite. Putin didn't reference any specific threat against Russian allies that could warrant an attack, but some see his remarks as a message to the U.S. as relations between the two countries continue to deteriorate.
Russian President Vladimir Putin boasted about Russia's nuclear might at his annual State of the Nation address in Moscow on Thursday, and seemed to confirm the existence of a long-feared Russian doomsday device. Putin turned towards offensive nuclear-capable systems near the end of a wide-ranging speech, where he also admitted that Russia needs to spend heavily on improving conditions for average Russians. Putin described at least 5 new weapon systems, and each time emphasized how they can defeat U.S. missile defenses, that they're almost all nuclear-capable.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says that he got nuclear weapons that are invincible. Mr. Putin made the threat at his annual State of the Union speech today. This comes after the U.S. withdrew from a Cold War era treaty and ahead of Russian elections. And in a video presentation, Putin claimed that one missile is low-flying and difficult to spot. He says it ultimately has an unlimited range and unpredictable flight path. Well, he also showed off a long-range submarine missile. It's capable of delivering a nuclear warhead. For more, we turn now to CBS News national security correspondent David Martin. He's at the Pentagon. David, how are U.S. officials responding to this and as he's saying it, invincible weapons?
Well, the Pentagon spokeswoman said just a short time ago that the U.S. was not surprised by the development of these new weapons and had already taken them into account in assessing the threat posed by Russia. The fact is that the U.S. has never had a defense against Russian ballistic missiles. So the fact that Russia is adding another type of missile, a cruise missile, to its nuclear arsenal still doesn't change the fact that the U.S. is defenseless against Russian missiles. The U.S. could always retaliate against a Russian strike in a way that would wipe out Russia, and that's the so-called balance of terror, which has existed ever since the first Cold War between the U.S. and the then Soviet Union. And these new weapons don't change that same balance.
You know, Putin says that these weapons are essentially undetectable. Does the Pentagon agree with that, too?
Well, certainly an underwater drone, which is essentially a mini submarine with a nuclear warhead on it, would be very difficult to detect if it approached the U.S. in a stealthy undersea manner. And if it were targeted at a large port or naval base, say Norfolk or San Diego, it would cause immense havoc and destruction. But you could say the same thing about Russian ballistic missiles, which would also be targeted against all major ports and naval bases. The cruise missile is a low, slow-flying, unmanned airplane. The U.S. has used cruise missiles for years now in the various wars in the Middle East. The difference here is that Putin said that this missile is powered by nuclear energy, which in effect gives it an unlimited range. So it could fly a very low profile, taking evasive maneuvers, and it would be hard to detect. There's no question about it. But a cruise missile flies at speeds of hundreds of miles an hour, And ballistic missiles fly at speeds of several thousand miles an hour. So at least with the cruise missile, you have more time to react.